2,400 years ago, near the eastern end of the Himalayan mountains, the first citrus tree was cultivated. 2,000 years later, Christopher Columbus brought citrus to the New World. And it's said that in his quest for the Fountain of Youth, the Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon planted the first citrus tree in a brand new world. A long time ago, there was a small town in Florida, a citrus town. A lot of great people lived there with their families, just like you in your town. But unlike your town, their heritage and way of life was about to fade away.
It was a tough time for not only the growers who lost their livelihood, but also for the community as a whole, because it had a cascading effect on the businesses and on the young people who were working here, and it was a tough time.
It was awful. Everything was dead. Even not only the citrus industry, but the town, the merchants suffered, our neighborhood suffered. People had to move out, and our friends left and didn't come back.
You're probably asking yourself what happened. Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back a few years. Let me tell you about a town that was right in the middle of citrus country, a town called Dade City. You might not know this, but growing citrus started in Florida before 1900 with the planting of orange and grapefruit trees. Citrus made Florida. Before the theme parks and the beaches, the Florida economy was built on citrus production. In fact, in the 1920s and 30s, folks didn't come to Florida for the beaches. They came for oranges. It became a billion-dollar industry employing over 200,000 people. Florida was covered with citrus groves. They were the backbone of Florida. Life was very different back then.
It was great. It was a great place to live. The community was doing well. It was just a great place to live, and a wonderful time.
The story of the town we're interested in starts back in the 20s, just after the end of World War I. During that time, and then the next 6 decades, Dade City grew to become the center of citrus in Florida. And Florida was the center of citrus in the world. In fact, right here where you're sitting now was once part of the Lykes Pasco juice plant, which was the largest citrus processing plant in the world. It employed over 2,000 people, all dedicated to turning out the best orange, grapefruit, and citrus products anywhere. They processed over 1/4 of all the Florida citrus produced each year.
Lykes Pasco was humming with the largest citrus processing plant in the world. And we had over 30,000 acres of citrus, and I can remember the trucks pulling in now with the oranges being processed. You could get that aroma from around town, and Dade City was a thriving community in the citrus industry.
We had about 1,200 people employed at this plant. We had another 2,500 working around the plant. We had 1,800 women doing sections, grapefruit sections and orange sections here in Canada. It was just a busy time.
Remember when coming to Florida meant bringing back home those big bags of oranges and grapefruits for your friends and neighbors to enjoy. Remember when fresh oranges and orange juice were something really special. Well, that's the way it was around here. Really special.
It was a wonderful time. All of your friends and neighbors, or a lot of the people you knew, worked in the plant, and you just see all of those people going into work with the whistle and leaving with the whistle, and just seeing all the activity around there was something that we thought would always be there.
But it was just a feeling of safety. It was a feeling of comfort. Everyone knew everyone. There were plenty of occasions when I would perhaps end up in the area where I wasn't really allowed to end up on my bike or with my friends, and I would get home and my mother would know when I was coming in the door where I'd been.
Most everyone here in Dade City was happy back then. They raised their families, went to church, and led a pretty nice life.
I had wonderful experiences growing up here myself personally. And then when I married Bill, we had our family here. There was never a thought to ever leave Dade City. Everybody knew everybody. And if you didn't know them, you at least had seen them enough when you'd pass them in the grocery store to acknowledge and say hello.
I loved Dade City. It was a wonderful place to live and to raise a family.
Dade City was the ideal American city, all right. And the success it saw in the 20s and 30s carried right on through the 70s and early 80s, until that terrible night when it happened. The almost total devastation of an entire town. But before I tell you about that, you should know that at about the same time, something important was going on. A young fellow named Jim, with his team, Don and Ronnie, were running their first small packing house in Safety Harbor. And their new enterprise would eventually help the rebirth of Dade City.
In '83, we had a packing house we were so proud of. We had bought it in February of '82. So we were in our first year. We had a packing house. We had a grove around the packing house and a remote grove. And we were just learning the business, and we were just so into it, so excited. We had done quite well. So we decided, well, let's take a vacation. So Don and I and a bunch of friends, we got together and we took off, got on a plane, went to Tampa International Airport, got on a plane, and left on Christmas Eve morning. About 10 o'clock that night, we arrived at our destination, and there was a message that we got to the hotel, and there was a message that we needed to call home right away. There was an emergency.
On December 24th, 1983, and again just over a year later on January 20th, 1985, tragedy struck. A freeze. Oh, there had been freezes before. Every few years, a cold snap ruins a crop, does some damage. But then things get back to normal soon enough. But this time, it was different. These were hard freezes. The temperature unexpectedly drops well below freezing and stays there overnight. Now, for those of you who live in places like North Dakota, Minnesota, or Maine, that may seem like just a cool winter evening. But it was enough to kill most of the citrus trees in Pasco County. Not only was the crop for those years lost, but the trees that died had to be destroyed and plowed under. Now, it takes about 7 years from the time the trees are planted until they can bear fruit. Well, sir, things got pretty bad here in Dade City.
We go to church for our 7 o'clock candle lighting ceremony. We end up outside at about 8 singing Joy to the World around the manger, and it is already in the 30s. And you can feel the tension of the impending freeze, of the impending doom. And what a strange set of events as we're excited about Christmas and the gifts and celebrating all that Christmas means, both spiritually and to our family. And at the same time, we know this is really going to be a doozy. We know it's coming.
From a family standpoint, raising your kids and everything, it was a wonderful place to be, but there was no future for kids in this thing after the freezes. They all had to go somewhere else. Nothing but heartache. A lot of people, when you don't have anything, and I don't mean that you don't have something to eat and that, but you've got no future as far as business goes. Look at all the businesses in downtown Dade City that have closed up. That hurts. All those places had payrolls and families, and they're all down now.
In our area, in this particular area, it devastated the area. All the groves were gone. The 50, 60-year-old trees had to be pushed out. It was a challenge for the industry itself. A lot of people were out of work. A lot of people a lot of people that related to the citrus industry. It just wasn't just the pickers, it was the packers, it was all the way down, a trickle-down effect.
In the blink of an eye, the Pasco plant went from 2,000 employees to less than 1,000. That's 1,000 people out of work in a town of only 4,000. It was a disaster. Not too much later, the plant began to close, department by department. Dade City was following the destiny of a lot of small American towns that had lost their industries. It was fading away.
Well, when the freezes hit, and they just came right after another, it was one of those things. We were really concerned about what was going to happen to us here in Dade City. Our economy had thrived on citrus for so long, and suddenly we were realizing that this could come to an end, and things really did slow down. And people were not trained to work other jobs. They'd lived here in Dade City and worked in the plant, and we, maybe second or third generation working here in the plant. And suddenly the way of life as we had always known it was, we could see that it was going to be coming to an end, and it was tough. We really didn't know where we were going to go from here. It was a scary time.
There was no industry here, just nothing. Evans' plant had shut down, this plant was shut down.
Families were moved and changed, and kind of some of the roots were pulled out of the ground and sent to other areas to work in. And it was just almost an acceptance at some point that something different had to happen out here, but with the hope that it would preserve and keep, at least in part, what was at one point an industry town.
Now, remember those boys from Safety Harbor with the packing house? Well, in 2004, Jim decided to come to Dade City to look around. What Jim was shown was really depressing, but what he saw was different.
And we pulled up to the gate, and Don just looked at me, I drove around for a little while, and Don just looked at me, and he says, "What are you gonna do with this place? What can we possibly do with it? It's such a disaster." Ronnie said, "This looks like a war zone. Don't you notice this, all these buildings falling down?" And I guess I didn't. I saw all through that, and I saw what could be done.
He saw a chance with his team to rebuild a great citrus tradition, a heritage that went back over 6 decades, a real part of American history that was almost lost forever.
We had found out that the plant had been sold, and many of us felt that this was a true miracle. We had envisioned on the downside of this being a ghost town, and so we have these skeleton of buildings sitting out here, but now Jim has come in, provided a facelift, and gave us an economic drive to revitalize this area.
What Jim, Don, and Ronnie decided to do was nothing short of rebuilding an entire industry in Dade City.
It really, it borders on being a miracle, I would say. It's quite a venture from a business standpoint, quite a risk, I would think, quite a gamble, but it's certainly proved to be evidently just quite successful.
Their plan was to reopen the plant, allow space for numerous new businesses which would create hundreds, if not thousands, of new jobs, and in turn, create a citrus business infrastructure that would allow Dade City to reclaim its proud heritage.
Now our children are able to stay in Dade City and not have to travel out of town for employment, and that they can experience the same wonderful quality of life that we did as children.
So when you drive through this small American town, remember, this can happen anywhere there are people who care.
A lady asked me, she said, "How do you feel about going into town?" I said, "I love it. I love going into a restaurant or going into anywhere, store or bookstore, anywhere you go. I feel like I'm George Bailey in the movie, It's a Wonderful Life."
With all that's wrong in the world today, still, some things are right here in Dade City. home of the finest citrus in the USA. And you've helped make it possible. Thanks for stopping by. And next time you pour yourself a glass of orange juice or serve a grapefruit for breakfast, remember, you didn't just buy an orange. You helped keep an industry and a town alive. A town called Dade City.